right, Nick, welcome to Unscripted. As promised, no prep.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, we've only got a half hour, so I'll jump right in. But tell folks a little bit about how you got into maybe your background and how you got into crypto.
Yeah, yeah. So I was just kind of a random person on the internet back in about 2012,
We all.
where I read a Wired article about this magic internet money that was being used to buy drugs and guns on Silk Road, right? Which was kind of the early media narrative about Bitcoin. And I was intrigued. I've always been like an online community person. So the first thing I did when I saw this article and kind of saw what Bitcoin was I wanted to find people on the internet that were talking about it. So I kind of jumped into Bitcoin Talk, which is the early Bitcoin forum that Satoshi created, as well as r/Bitcoin, which is the main Bitcoin subreddit. And I kind of just dove into those communities and was hooked. I saw that while kind of the media narrative was one thing, underneath the surface, there was this really passionate community of people from around the world that weren't aligned by physical location, but were aligned by kind of economic incentives and a shared belief system. And jumped in the Bitcoin rabbit hole and have been down it ever since. Joined Coinbase about a year later, which is kind of the early bridge between Bitcoin and the traditional financial system. Spent a few years there, and now I'm running 1confirmation, which is a venture fund that invests in the cryptocurrency ecosystem, both in companies that are building in the ecosystem as well as directly in cryptocurrencies.
And when did you start 1confirmation?
About 3 years ago. So 2017, kind of the last big crypto bull market, and that's when you and I first spoke.
That's when we met. Yeah. Did we meet through Dan Romero?
I think Dan or Samil.
Or Samil, yeah. Okay. Yeah, got it.
So
yeah, I mean, what a crazy time that was. And I, by the way, as a disclaimer, I should tell everybody I am an investor in your fund. So we met, and I was super impressed with how you were thinking about the space. But like, walk us through sort of what's happened since 2017. Like you said, that was sort of like, I think when crypto hit, beyond Bitcoin, hit a lot of people's radar, was 2017.
Yep.
Walk us through sort of what you've seen happen in the space over the last 3 years.
Yeah, so I think the mainstream and kind of people outside of crypto, they tend to focus on price, right? And that's what the media focuses as well. So when prices went crazy in 2017, that's when a lot of people gravitated towards the space. And we've seen like 4 big booms and crashes. And the nature of crypto, because it's global and because we live in this hyper-connected world now, and anyone can trade these things. The booms and busts are crazier than anything really ever seen before in financial markets. So 2017, we saw a big boom. The price of Bitcoin went to 20K, and all this excitement, ICOs went crazy. And then we saw a major correction, right, in price. So the last kind of 3 years have been, generally, I would say crypto has been off the kind of mainstream radar, but there's been a lot of really exciting stuff happening in terms of building real products that bring crypto to people beyond just pure price speculation. And that's kind of what we've been trying to invest in. And a lot of the products that are now starting to see real traction are still kind of financial related, but beyond just purely like speculating on the price of Bitcoin.
Yeah. So let me ask you 2 questions. One, what are some of the things beyond Bitcoin that you're most excited about? Maybe you can give us some examples of some of those underlying technology platforms that are being created. And 2, I guess, is when do we get to a point where the average person sees what I would call as sort of like a mainstream use case for crypto beyond trading? And maybe those lead into each other, but just start with some of the technologies, maybe 2 or 3 things that you're just super excited about that have been created in the last few years.
Yeah, so I would say the one use case that I arguably, the user experience to get into this stuff is still not great yet. Yeah. But the real use case that I'm super excited about, that we're seeing people using in 2020, and we're going to continue to, is saving, right? So, the last boom was all about investment and speculation. And now there's ways to store value and earn yield. In a world where, even in the US, close to zero interest rates. And, if you want to save dollars, you're really not
You're
able
not
to
doing
get
very
much
well.
interest on your money. You can move your assets into crypto and start, earning 5% to 2,000%. Now, the 2,000% stuff obviously is speculative, and that's, yield farming is probably a term that some have heard on this. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with yield farming at all?
Yeah, but explain it to folks so people understand what it is and
Well,
why it's, yeah.
Yeah, very simply, it's it's moving money into protocols that give you a yield on your money. And there's the question is, how is that yield earned, right? And so there's some Compound was really the product that started off this craze. And so if you moved your money into Compound, which is just a smart contract, so you have ETH or any asset on an address, send it to another address, and start earning, say, 500% APY. And how is that 500% APY earned? Compound is distributing tokens to users of the protocol. Mm-hmm. So you could think of it like mining in Bitcoin, right? How is the token distribution in Bitcoin work? You have to run hardware and secure the network, and in return for that, you earn Bitcoin. And so new protocols, Compound as an example, many others, are basically telling users, if you move your money into this smart contract, then we're going to distribute tokens to you. And typically the distribution mechanism is very high early on. And so it's kind of a growth marketing tactic, right? Where you can say, move money into this protocol and get 2,000% APY. And it's been crazy. I mean, this started with Compound, but since there's been hundreds of these protocols, some of which are scams, others which are serious long-term projects.
That was going to be one of my questions for you: is how do you tell the difference, or how does the average investor tell the difference between those that are real and those that are a scam?
Yeah, I mean it's similar question to ICOs, right? I think how we think of it is this isn't necessarily something that everyone should be participating in. I mean, you have to spend the time to talk to the people building it and kind of understand, how they think about it. One of the problems in ICOs, similar in yield farming, is you have these anonymous founders that are, marketing these kind of, innovative products that have huge, potential returns.
Which is how they get people into the network, right? They promise the return, and that's what brings people in.
And then they pull the rug, right?
Yeah.
And that's happened as well. So you have to be careful, of course. And it's not for, everyone shouldn't be participating in this stuff probably unless you have the time to spend.
So are we at the phase? Is it fair to say we're at a phase of the market where the average retail investor who doesn't have time to do the research, read the white papers, figure out who all these players are, should be focused on sort of the top tier assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then below that is a little bit more of the wild, wild west, and that'll evolve over time?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, Dan and I were having this conversation over text.
Oh, nice. Yeah. But, on kind of the yield front, there are, even beyond Bitcoin and Ethereum, if you want to earn 5%, I haven't checked today, but lately it's been around 5% to store your money in DAI. DAI is a stable coin, and so you don't have to worry about the volatility, unlike Bitcoin and ETH. And it tracks the dollar, and it's around the same volatility as the dollar. So you store your money in DAI and earn 5%. That's something that is it's DAI is kind of the stable coin backed by the MakerDAO system. It's one of our kind of largest early
so
investment.
your point is there is a consumer use case today. It's saving,
Yep.
right? Which people
Yep.
are not getting by having their cash parked in a bank account because they're basically losing money to interest. Inflation. If inflation is 2 to 3% a year and you're earning, I think my SCB account, I earn like 0.1,
Yep.
you're losing money.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can move your assets into stable coins. So, similar volatility is, the volatility in your bank account. And there's certainly, an added degree of risk just associated with like moving your money into an Ethereum wallet and smart contracts. There is, risk there that's above, your FDIC insured bank account. But, for 5%, it's okay. And you can also get insurance now. And, one of our largest investments in Fund 2 is a project called Nexus Mutual, which is, smart contract insurance effectively. So you could, move your money into DAI, generate 5%, pay 1% to get that, that wallet insured in the case of a smart contract hack. Lock in.
This is a famous, I think it's John Malone quote, borrow money at 1% and earn 4% in AT&T and just sit back and, and print money. So there's a lot of arbitrage out there. Folks, kind of brings to mind for me, like if I'm somebody who's looking to get smarter on this space, is there anything you'd recommend people read or pay attention to? Are there good websites where you go for information? Or, I recommend books, and there's a few white papers you can read that I think are interesting. But what do you recommend to folks that are trying to learn more?
Yeah. So one of the things I've been thinking about lately is kind of this gap between like media information and kind of the real information kind of underlying what the media is talking about. And I think one of the biggest gaps, ever was like Bitcoin, right? In the early days of Bitcoin, there was like the media narrative, and then underneath the surface, there's like what's really happening. And what I found is the best way to kind of sort the two is to dive into these forums. And I continue to say that's kind of the best thing to do if you have the time is, go on Reddit, go in the different subreddits, whether it's r/Bitcoin or r/Ethereum. There's most of these projects have Discords now to dive in and see what people are talking about, see if there's real substance here. Follow people on Twitter, engage in Twitter. So I think that is the single best thing to do. Of course, a lot of people don't have that time.
Right.
And so, there's like, there's the Crypto Canon by A16Z, which is a good kind of resource that just has, a bunch of blog posts and stuff that have been written by different people in the community over the past 5 years. But it's all kind of primary sources, right? It's like the people that are building, and that's the best, way to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you see? So, in 2017, we had this explosion of media coverage. I think it was crypto kind of became a global phenomenon. And then we had, big regulation in China and some other markets. What's been the global trend, outside of the US around crypto over the last few years for those who may not have any exposure to what's happening? Because one of the use cases, obviously, for crypto, or one of the potential benefits for crypto, is you sort of move into a denomination system that isn't necessarily controlled by any one country, like the US dollar or the Chinese yuan. Are we seeing that happen? Are there countries and citizens in countries that are increasing their exposure to crypto for that reason? What's happening outside the US?
Well, I would say one interesting kind of thing that I've noticed kind of in 2020 relative to 2017 is that I think in like 2017, in the lead up to 2017, outside the US was really kind of driving kind of momentum, China and South Korea and a lot of, just a lot of countries outside, primarily Asian, but others as well. In 2020, that is not happening as much. And it really, a lot of the interesting stuff happening, and on the retail side, a lot of the momentum is actually in the US. So it's kind of, I would
That's
say
interesting.
the U.S. is kind of, at least as I perceive it, and what I see, happening, and the data is, U.S. is actually has flipped to becoming kind of more important in this latest kind of boom. And
Do you think that's because there's more capital here to go into these projects at the early stages, or why would that be?
well,
Curious.
I think one thing is just a lot of the the projects, the innovation is still happening here. And so like in 2017, Asia was super important from a retail perspective and was like driving the momentum in prices. But I did a few trips there, and wasn't super impressed by just the stuff happening from an entrepreneurship perspective and the
Hmm.
building going on there. It was a lot of Ethereum of China and kind of these derivative projects, I would say. And so um, you know I can't speak as much to why the retail boom hasn't come back in Asia in particular, but one reason might be there just hasn't been a lot of more kind of innovation since just
Hmm.
speculative crypto stuff. And to be clear, there is stuff happening there that I'm excited about. We've invested in a few Asian projects, and it's a really important region still. But I just think a lot of the most exciting, from my biased U.S. perspective at least, stuff in the space is still happening primarily in the
Oh, that's cool. That's good to hear. Um, okay, so a couple of interesting things have happened this year. You had, uh, you know, Square announced that they're putting some of their cash reserves in Bitcoin. What's the other company? MicroStrategy.
Yep.
Uh, is that a trend? Is that a fad? How should people be thinking about that? I mean, back to your point about yield, is this a thing that's going to happen more frequently?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think, look, Bitcoin has become kind of an institutional asset that, institutions are starting to really understand from a long-term investment perspective, right? It has a very clear narrative, which is digital gold. And so, it's funny because Bitcoin started, and what really excited me most about Bitcoin was kind of the idea of this kind of cryptocurrency for the people, right? That anyone around the world could use and no one controlled. And that was like what excited me from the beginning about Bitcoin. And it still is that, right? Anyone can use it and no one controls it. And that is why Bitcoin, I think is just going to increase in importance in the world. But it's interesting because these big public companies that are now buying it on their balance sheet, and the institutional investment that's coming in, and it's all very Bitcoin focused now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what is going to drive a lot of the future growth of Bitcoin. One metric we track internally is the number of addresses that have more than $300 worth of a cryptocurrency. And we look at like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and Ethereum is now, ETH is now, outpacing Bitcoin on that metric significantly. And so you have, it's certainly, to answer your question directly, I think the institutional investment is certainly going to grow as people, are excited about this kind of digital gold narrative. But in terms of like people adopting it, I see Ethereum kind of growing quicker on that front because there's so much innovation happening on Ethereum, and Bitcoin is kind of just this digital gold.
Yeah.
So
I will say when I was late, like 16, 17 to really diving in. And the thing that got me excited was just going deep on Ethereum, kind of understanding the technology, how it worked. That's a pretty cool rabbit hole to go down, and gets you pretty excited from an entrepreneurial technology standpoint. If you really go deep on Ethereum and why it exists and how it works and all the offshoots of it, that's pretty exciting.
Mm-hmm. This is like, when I was at Coinbase, in 2013, 2014, we had this API platform, and it was only Bitcoin. And the applications that were built using Bitcoin and the Coinbase API, weren't that interesting, right? They were just focused on kind of making it easier to invest in Bitcoin and things like that. And then Ethereum came along, and you can do a lot more as a developer with Ethereum. And so when we talk about things like yield farming and stable coins, and a lot of the kind of bleeding edge trends that are most exciting and that are attracting new users to cryptocurrency, they're all happening in in Ethereum. And there's a few in particular that I'm super excited about, like even that have popped up this year, things like,
yeah, talk about them, mention them.
So one that I think is massively kind of underappreciated still is crypto art. And so kind of this idea of a non-fungible token popped up in around 2017. CryptoKitties was kind of the first example of that, which kind of, you're familiar with it.
Yeah, of course.
It kind of grew really quickly. There was kind of a mania, I think, a CryptoKitty, which is just a digital cat artwork, effectively, sold for $100,000 or something. And then the whole thing crashed, and the CryptoKitties is still around, but it didn't become this really interesting game that people thought it could be. But this idea of,
but the idea was interesting.
The idea of a collectible that lives on a blockchain that as a collector, you have true ownership of, and you can do interesting things with, that has remained. And crypto art in particular, I've taken an interest in, and we invested in a project called Super Rare, which makes it easy for digital artists to mint authentic artworks on chain and sell them to collectors. And I don't know that much about traditional art, but obviously it's a massive industry where rich people just collect art for signaling, because they use it as a store of value, things like that. The same thing is happening for crypto rich people.
Which
right?
is funny to me, because I had this conversation with somebody who thought this whole thing was ridiculous. And I said, well, okay, so let's say you and I walk into an art gallery and there's a painting for sale for 10 million. It's an original, Picasso. And right next to it is a fake Picasso that's $10.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that ridiculous? It's the same painting.
Yep.
Right. And so getting people's heads around this whole digital economy and how to sort of transfer the principles that have worked for hundreds of years or thousands of years in real life into this digital world, I think is just something that people have a hard time getting their heads around.
Yeah. It's definitely, it definitely can be a leap to understand, why would people care about collecting this thing? What I always say is, like, physical artworks, they're kind of hard, they're relatively hard to copy, but they're also very hard to authenticate, right?
Yeah.
As you said, how can, like, the average person can't tell, a Picasso, a real one, from a fake, right? If it's a good fake. The digital art is easier to copy, right? It's easy to cut and paste a digital file, but also very easy to authenticate, because the authentic lives on chain, and if you have the address and can sign the private key to that address, you prove ownership. And so this is something that it's still relatively early. One of the questions is, like, how do collectors signal? In the physical art world, you can hang a painting in your wall, show it off to your friends. In the crypto art world, there are digital frames. I have one right here, a mural canvas too. You can show off your collection there. There's also I think VR is going to be really interesting, and there are collectors that are building galleries in VR and showing off their collection.
And do you think it's just a matter of time before people who are in their 20s and 30s, who have sort of grown up in this universe, these things become mainstream? Or do you think, I think it's unlikely people in their 60s, 70s, et cetera, adopt these models. I think it's more likely that the younger, or am I wrong? How do you think about that?
No, I think that's fair. Yeah. I mean, one of the exciting trends, why I'm particularly excited about crypto art, is that it's really attracting new people to the space.
Yeah.
Like the DeFi and a lot of the yield farming stuff that I've talked about, it is attracting some new people who, as I said, want to get yield and want to save, but it's still a pretty kind of inward behavior that crypto people are doing. But crypto art, just last week, this guy Beeple, who has 1.7 million followers on Instagram, this huge digital artist, he puts out, he uses some 3D animation software and puts out, a work on a day on Instagram, and it tends to be cultural. He does
That's cool.
political stuff. He's got a massive following, and he's had this massive following on Instagram, and hasn't he's had some success monetizing it, but like hasn't had tremendous success monetizing it. And then he sees that there are collectors in Ethereum that are willing to pay tens of thousands of dollars for art, and says, I don't know anything about crypto, but I just see what's happening here and it's helpful to me. And so, last week he entered the crypto art world. His one of one piece, he did an auction for it. It sold for $66,000.
Wow. Now, was he able to do that directly? I.e., he's not going through some gallery and middleman and broker.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's cool. I mean, I love the idea. One of the things that's been awesome about the internet is, it's increased the TAM, right? Of almost every category, the market is bigger than people thought, because you're cutting out middlemen, you're cutting out friction, you're cutting out fees. Feels like that's what is going to happen here. You're going to increase the TAM of a bunch of categories that people haven't really thought about yet.
Exactly.
Hey, we've got about 4 minutes left. Give us sort of one prediction for next year. Like, what's the thing that everybody's going to, is it saving and yield? What's the thing that everybody's going to be talking about in this space in 2021? And you could be wrong. We're all wrong a lot.
Yeah. Well, look, I think we're still relatively early in the speculative phase of crypto. So I think in 2021, if I had to predict one thing that everyone will be talking about, it's going to be price again. And the price is just something that gravitates people, and the media especially focuses on. And so if I had to predict one, it's not going to necessarily be any of these use cases. These use cases do exist, and there's going to be more and more usage of them, but it's likely going to be, the price and the price of Bitcoin, right? So when the price of Bitcoin hits a new high, that's going to get a ton of press. We live in a world that's, I would say there's less trust in institutions than there was even in 2017. Mm-hmm. And so kind of this combination of there being less trust in institutions and, price being compelling, it's likely that we're talking about Bitcoin and ETH as well as kind of these two.
You sort of see just an inevitable flow of capital into this category, and that drives price up.
Yep. Then price drives media attention, drives more attention. So I think that's likely to be, I don't know if it's going to happen in 2021.
So do we go through another ramp and then down again? Yeah. that seems to be what everybody says.
Yeah.
That's tough. Tell, we got 2 minutes. Tell everybody one fun story about being in this space over the last 3 years. I mean, you must run into some amazing people, see some really cool stuff that nobody hears about. Just, I don't know, do you have an anecdote or a story that's kind of a fun one that you could share?
Let me think. I don't.
Anthony always liked to ask at the end of his podcast if people believe there's alien life. So I always try to find out if there's something that, an inside baseball story that maybe people haven't heard that's pretty cool. Because there's so much happening in this space that nobody hears about. To your point, the media coverage all over price.
Yeah.
At CNBC, they're not going to talk about like projects that are just getting started by 3 guys and a dog.
Yeah. Well, it's not really a cool story, but one of the things that I'm super excited about is prediction markets, and have been prediction markets kind of are this this idea of allowing people, anyone who has information, to contribute that information to a market. Mm-hmm. And the market kind of reveals the price. And so this is something that I've really been obsessed with for like the past 6 years. right? And it hasn't really happened yet. And there's been kind of some excitement, some products, Augur being the main one that you know, we like and we've been interested in, but it hasn't really broken out to kind of the mainstream. And I think a lot of people in crypto are kind of skeptical of you know, most information, and you know, prediction markets have the ability to be kind of this arbiter of truth that you know, that you can rely on. Of course, this only happens when like a lot of people are using them and there's a lot of liquidity. But you know, we've seen the election.
I was just going to say, we just saw it. I mean, the prediction market predicted a much closer election, if not a Trump win, than the mainstream media was, and they turned out to be right. I mean, he didn't win, but but it was closer.
And it feels like an inflection point for prediction markets. So some of the, you know, there's been a lot of these kind of early believers in prediction markets that you know, we've been working with for you know, for many years, and that are now you know, it feels like there could be a moment for prediction markets, kind of led by the
That's cool.
election. So not really, I don't have many cool stories, I guess. But, it's another kind of tidbit or, you know, something to.
That's all right. That's all right. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, hey man, thanks for doing it. Appreciate it. I'm thrilled to be an investor. I love all the stuff you're working on. I love getting your quarterly letters. It's always a fun read, and thanks for doing the show with me.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was fun. Let's catch up.
All right, Nick.
Yeah.
Take care.